Welcome to another episode of Small Talk and Big Ideas, where we have a small discussion about some big ideas. My name's Peter, and I'm wondering, have you ever been persuaded by a story or so profoundly moved by a compelling news article that you changed the way that you behaved? Impactful journalism is one of the most influential catalysts for behavioral and social change in modern history. We can all agree that throughout history, we've significantly changed our individual and social behavior after being exposed to a compelling story or irrefutable evidence. These exposures invoke such an emotional and psychological connection with us that we can't ignore our association with them, and subsequently, we make changes in hopes to bring about positive change to ourselves and the environment that surrounds us. From Watergate to the Me Too movement, there are countless examples of how impactful journalism and relatable evidence sparks empathy and motivation in us to change. Yet, if an impactful story or compelling evidence is what motivates us to make major changes on a large scale, why do we still struggle with the same old unhelpful behaviors day to day, despite having abundant evidence and emotional stories that should prompt us to make changes? Here are some examples that perhaps many of us can relate to experiencing: miscommunication, unresolved problems, opposition, ineffective decision making, inadaptability, resentment, and resistance. I'm willing to bet that all of us can identify with at least one of these struggles, and if we're being honest, likely have a colorful story or two about it. Well, if changing behavior were easy, we'd all be able to do it no problem. But it's not that easy. Have you ever heard anybody say that to you after you've given them advice? I have. And they're right. Even when the advice is as clear as day, it's just not that easy. It's not until somebody personally and objectively reflects on their behaviors and the resources they have to make change that they find a way to bring everything together and start working towards that change. If you don't know why your behavior continues to occur, or you don't understand how to make appropriate changes using the resources available to you, it's kind of like putting together a piece of furniture without the instructions or the right tools. True, some of us might find a way to do it successfully, but a majority of us will either give up, call somebody else to do it, or cobble things together only to find out that the furniture falls apart under the weight of being used. Isn't it funny that these experiences we encounter regularly and consistently spark a strong personal response are the ones that we accept as just a fact of life? Instead of finding motivation to develop ourselves or find resources to help us improve our dilemmas, we develop guilt, shame, resentment, and even apathy. We begin to associate more with the external barriers, giving them more weight and labeling them as insurmountable, than focusing on what we can change internally to facilitate a better outcome next time. Why? Because it's not that easy. But when we say that, what we really mean is that we don't know how we can have an impact on an outcome any more than we already have. And that's a fair statement. If you don't know, you don't know. So let's shed some light on how we can change that perspective by understanding what it is that keeps our motivation from developing. Psychological resistance is our first stop, but it's a pretty big concept, so let's break it down a little bit. Resistance is defined by the American Psychological Association as generally any action in opposition to, defying, or withstanding something or someone, even change. If we want to go deep into a comprehensive understanding of psychological resistance, we'd start by listening to Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic approach and how defense mechanisms protect us from individual anxiety and stress. After all, making changes is stressful, but not all of us have time to lay on the couch and reflect on Freud's psychoanalytic approach in great detail, so let's try to condense decades of research from Freud and other psychologists into something bite-sized. Psychological resistance is something that prevents us from making changes in our lives, whether it's changing our beliefs or changing our behavior. There's a lot that goes into this, and there's no shortage of leading experts whose contributions have helped us understand the concept. Stephen Hayes' psychological inflexibility, Carol Dweck's fixed mindset, Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance, and Irving Janis's groupthink are just some of the theories and concepts that go into our understanding of why we say F it when it comes to addressing the challenges with changing behavior. So let's take these theories and concepts and highlight some of the threads related to psychological resistance. First, fear of change. Fear is a real experience that the defense mechanisms Freud talked about protect us from. Denial and repression, compartmentalization and isolation are just some of the examples of these defense mechanisms. Since fear is rooted in the discomfort that is associated with the unknown, like change, we tend to avoid it and embrace such cliches as, when in doubt, go with what you know. We are creatures of habit after all, but this go-to behavior hinders our ability to develop knowledge about ourselves, our behaviors, and the resources available to us that can help us with changing. This, together with the notion of staying in our comfort zone, relates to Stephen Hayes and Carol Dweck's concepts of psychological inflexibility and fixed mindset, which in a nutshell is the inability and unwillingness to be open or adaptive in the presence of changing situations. It's something that many of us struggle with, and cliches like when in doubt, go with what you know reinforce our avoidance. After all, it's easier to go with what you know rather than tackle something new or challenging. So instead, we tell ourselves that it's beyond our control and beyond our ability. This is when cognitive dissonance starts creeping in. Cognitive dissonance happens when we realize a discrepancy between our beliefs and actions. So we might experience some guilt or frustration that we haven't been able to overcome a challenge that we thought we should have been able to. Now, according to Leon Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance, we end up making a choice to reduce this internal struggle that we experience. Either we change our beliefs about the situation or we decide to make behavioral changes. Hopefully, when this dissonance happens, we recognize the benefits of changing our behavior and go for it. But often we find ourselves changing our perspective to convince ourselves that we can't change or that there's too many external factors for us to make a difference. And if we start reinforcing that idea by chatting with family or friends who tell us the same thing, we might find ourselves looking for another job, finding a different relationship, or really just any way of continuing without having to make a change to our life that conflicts with our beliefs. That experience is something that Irving Janis's group think concept discusses. Our family and friends want what's best for us and to maintain a good relationship, but in the desire and pursuit of harmony, family and friends tend to avoid conflict or critically analyzing any opposing perspectives that might be relevant. Okay, so now that we've explored some of the reasons why we tend to avoid making changes within ourselves, let's talk about the elements that go into facilitating motivation and thus real change. Like psychological resistance, there's a busload of experts who have contributed to the understanding of motivation. From concepts of reinforcement to self-determination, the theories and explanations are abundant. So let's try to understand some of the leading theories on what motivates us. B.F. Skinner's explanation for motivation, in simple terms, is that behavior is influenced by its consequences. If a behavior leads to a positive outcome or reward, individuals are more likely to repeat the behavior. Conversely, if the behavior results in a negative consequence, the likelihood of repeating that behavior decreases, meaning if we tried a new way to handle the challenge and it failed or didn't sit well with us, we abandon it and go back to the behaviors we know were successful. This goes the same for trying out new soft skills. So let's talk about priorities. Sometimes making a change just is not a priority for us, or at least it doesn't trump other more important priorities. Abraham Maslow goes to describe this phenomenon and how prioritized needs in life affect behavior, suggesting that the more primal and immediate needs for survival take priority. For example, dealing with a conflict at work so that you have a good day might be less important than ensuring the work gets done so that you can bring home a paycheck. Which is why often it results in us putting up with a bad relationship simply because we know that a paycheck is more important. So we've mentioned reinforcement and we've mentioned priorities. But what about the whole framework related to motivation? Not everybody can understand the hierarchy of needs, so Edward Deci and Richard Ryan developed a framework for understanding intrinsic motivation, stating that everyone needs to have 3 internal needs that must be met to be motivated: autonomy, competence, and relatedness, meaning if we don't feel in charge, ready, or capable of change, we avoid it. The theories of these experts and others not mentioned overlap in some contexts, which we can highlight now as takeaways. To spark motivation for change, we need to feel and acknowledge the emotions and thoughts prompting us to make a change. We must have a belief that what we're doing will work out for us, understand how making a change fulfills our needs, and recognize the immediacy of making that change. Further, we need to feel like we're in charge of making the change ourselves. So when somebody gives us advice, that's why we can identify with the whole "don't tell me what to do" response. On top of all of that, we need to adopt a mindset of willingness and curiosity to adapt and evolve the changes we implement while considering external factors that might affect the possible outcomes. So, we need to recognize the need for change, be willing to give it a shot, feel confident in our ability to make the change, and be on the lookout for the unexpected. So there's quite a bit that goes into sparking internal motivation, but it all starts with being presented with something that triggers the rest of it to happen. Circling back now, this is why effective storytelling and journalism have such an impact on motivating us. Stories that hit home for us by relating to our immediate experiences and emphasizing how our involvement is important to us plucks at our motivational strings. Think about the coverage of such events like 9/11, the Me Too movement, or COVID-19. These events are powerful enough in themselves to create some change for some people, but for many of us, it's the coverage of the stories from different angles and perspectives, the ongoing discussion and analysis, and the achievable calls to action and opportunities to involve oneself that really create motivation in us to get involved and make a difference. Effective storytelling and engaging journalism are going much further now thanks to technology by providing a more immersive and relatable experience for us to engage with. Leading experts in the field of virtual journalism and storytelling are raising the bar when it comes to facilitating an experience that we can relate to, emotionally connect with, and develop a better understanding of the power we have to change. Nani de la Pina, an American journalist, filmmaker, and the founder of Emblematic, is one such expert. She's the CEO of Emblematic, which is a digital company devoted to providing an immersive experience for audiences to connect to news and nonfiction experiences. And she published an article in 2010 discussing immersive journalism and how it can facilitate an opportunity for people to increase their level of understanding about various current events by providing a first-person experience for viewers and opportunities for the viewer to engage with the stories that are being presented. So we've talked about how great journalism and storytelling can invoke people to participate and make changes. Now let's consider this through the lens of soft skill development. Remember those challenges we all face day to day? You know, the ones that stress us out, but always seem to evade our attempts at resolving them. Tying together everything that we've talked about, in order to make changes to our behavior or develop the effective soft skills to overcome these challenges, we must first recognize that we all resist change. It's a defense mechanism for us that protects us, but it can keep us from changing, from evolving. And change is the key to evolution, but evolution is the door to growth and development. So, to overcome these challenges, we need to focus on the psychological factors that influence our resistance to change. Fear, as mentioned, is a significant factor to address. Recognizing this fear and consciously challenging ourselves to step out of our comfort zone is the first step. Next, embracing psychological flexibility allows us to adapt and be open to change, fostering an environment where personal growth can occur. Additionally, acknowledging and addressing cognitive dissonance is essential. So when faced with conflicting beliefs about our ability to improve our soft skills, it's crucial to choose a path that leads to positive outcomes rather than succumbing to self-limiting beliefs. This requires a conscious effort to challenge and reshape our beliefs and encourages us to engage in open discussions with others who may offer alternative viewpoints that can help break unhelpful beliefs and encourage personal growth. Now, B.F. Skinner's reinforcement theory taught us that positive outcomes from our actions reinforce behavior. So, we should identify and celebrate small victories along our journey of change. Recognizing progress, no matter how small, reinforces the belief that change is possible. On top of giving ourselves a pat on the back for successes, ensuring that our basic needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness are met and aligns with our goals and core needs, we create a foundation for intrinsic motivation and enhance our internal drive for change. Finally, embracing immersive experiences, as discussed by Nani de la Pina, can be a game changer in soft skill development. Virtual journalism and storytelling provide a unique platform for first-hand experiences, fostering empathy and understanding. Integrating such experiences into soft skill training creates impactful and memorable learning opportunities. In conclusion, addressing psychological resistance, fostering motivation, and leveraging immersive experiences are integral components of overcoming the challenges associated with soft skill development. And remember, the journey toward development is not always easy, but it is undoubtedly rewarding. So until the next Small Talk and Big Ideas episode, don't forget to learn, play, and innovate.